What's going on, guys? It's Arrow. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are taking some meta tech and putting it onto a classic favorite skill of mine, COBRA LASH. So this league, a few things were introduced to the game that are incredibly powerful. Number one, a Doryani's Prototype Mercenary, which can lower enemy res by 200. Secondly, we are using Coiling Whisper to get over 14 attacks per second. A lot of the gear that I bought for this build is surprisingly cheap because accuracy stackers are just not very popular right now. However, with the rising cost of the Reflecting Mist, you're probably going to have to do something different in the rank slot, but we'll get to that later. So for those of you who are unaware, COBRA LASH is a skill that scales chains in order to get single target damage and clear. COBRA LASH by default gets 7 chains, including its quality, but the big piece here is this line on the gem. 8% more damage with hits and ailments for each remaining chain. So when you hit an enemy, the first enemy hit will get all of that bonus damage. If you have 10 chains, then you'll get 80% more damage. The quality on COBRA LASH can be increased with Ashes of the Stars, so that we get 10 chains just from our COBRA LASH gem. We play Deadeye to get one more, including Wall Chain. And what we have is a skill that hits a ton of enemies a ton of times, but also has really nice single target. The second thing that was introduced this league that's incredibly powerful is the Coiling Whisper. Now, the way that I go about acquiring my Coiling Whisper stacks is going to be a little bit clunky for some, but I really enjoyed it because the build felt so snappy. Coiling Whisper says that when 90% of a hex expires on an enemy, you gain a Soul Eater charge depending on the power of the enemy. Normal, magic, rare, unique, etc. will give you different amount of power. The more difficult the mob, the more power it gives. We have a hex that lasts 0.05 seconds, so that the instant it's applied, it is removed and you instantly gain those stacks. 45 Soul Eater charges is essentially double damage, and it's very, very easy to keep up. Defensively, this build goes for max spell suppress, max block, max spell block, around 90,000 armor, 89 max res, and an insane amount of recovery. Now, keep in mind this build is expensive. It is an accuracy stacker. Anytime you're stacking anything, it's probably going to get expensive on the high end, but a lot of the core pieces are cheap. So let's jump in game and see what the build looks like, talk about the gear, the gems, the passive trait, and the mercenary, and get you playing. Let's go. Okay, so here we have level 96 Arrow back to his roots. COBRA LASH was the first full build guide that I actually made on my channel back in 2017, but don't go watch that. So let's talk about the gear. What you're looking for on a weapon is attack speed, lightning damage, crit chance, accuracy, and pen. And the way that I made this is I bought the fracture on an Imperial Claw. You want as much attack speed as you can get. So the best base for that is the Imperial Claw. And then I used accuracy essences until I hit either tier 1 crit or tier 1 attack speed. And then I would lock the suffixes and reforge either speed or crit chance to try to hit the other one. This took me a few tries, but the accuracy roll is so high on an essence that it's worth going for the essenced variant. Once you do that, the craft becomes very simple. You can use a Veiled Chaos or a Veiled Exalt. The Veiled Exalt's incredibly expensive but low risk. The Veiled Chaos could fill the prefixes, but I was not worried about that, and we got 16 pen. I also got insanely lucky. I threw a few divines at this and hit perfect accuracy. This helmet is actually a little bit of overkill. That +1 power charge I don't actually need. I'm overcapped on critical strike chance. However, when I first started putting this build together, there was a bunch of these available because no one's using this item, and I only paid 5 divines for this. It got nearly perfect accuracy. It's a crazy item. Don't expect to try to get it now, but you don't need the power charge. You can just get one with 90% cost and reservation multiplier, and I'm pretty sure it's under a divine. For the shield, we went for a Dawnbreaker with max fizz taken as fire, as well as much block as we could get. The reason we want to go for a lot of block is because we take versatile combatant. Extra block chance equals spell block, so you want to be significantly overcapped because when you take damage, you do lose block chance. So the more overcapped you are, the better. I'm not currently capped on spell block because I dropped this mastery to take another point. I don't actually remember what it was, but really the build just needs to get a couple more levels. I'm only level 96. Ashes of the Stars we talked about. The quality on this is super nice. It affects all of your skill gems. It doesn't just give extra chains for our COBRA LASH. It gives more travel distance on Frostblink. It gives more attack speed from Blood Rage. It gives more defense from Sigil of Power. We'll get there. Then we have the Coiling Whisper. The only stat that matters on this is the Chaos Res. We don't apply our Hex in an AoE, so that does not matter. And the other ring is going to be very difficult to get. I have way more curse reduction than I need on here. So much that I actually had to put quality onto my temp chains. So you can go for significantly less than this. However, that massive accuracy roll, this is going to be a little bit tougher to do. The minus mana cost is actually not as important as you think. If you don't get this, you can actually go for a higher level Sigil of Power. Sigil of Power is incredibly strong in that it provides offense and defense for us. You effectively put it on the ground, and then you just cast over and over again until it upgrades. And the more mana you spend, the higher tier you can sustain. The idea is before a boss fight, you have 4 seconds right before the boss spawns in. You spawn your Sigil of Power, you start attacking, and it builds up stages. Each stage gives you flat damage, and when you get to max stages, it gives you damage reduction. When combined with some more levels and an Ashes, this goes well over 30%, but you have to spend mana to do it. This ring doesn't allow me to do that, so we just went for low mana cost. If you do want to make something like this, you need to get a Delve ring that also has accuracy, and then 2 mods or 1 mod that you don't really care about, and then try to Reflecting Mist it. That's incredibly expensive. I don't recommend doing that. I would just try to buy something that's already on the market, as mists have gone up to 60 something divines. On the gloves, the important thing here is a frenzy charge. These gloves give us crit chance per 200 accuracy. We have about 40,000 in the endgame, which means we have a ton of crit chance. We use this Mage Blood mostly so we can get max res. We're trying to get to 90 max. I have a couple of other flasks that I use for various content. I use this gold flask with rarity whenever I'm just trying to farm gold. And I recently swapped off of this Quicksilver in order to use a silver flask with regen on it. This makes bosses much, much nicer. So I get half the speed of a Quicksilver, but I also get attack and cast speed. And then I get that almost 6% regen. On the boots, I actually planned to craft these, but I ended up buying a pair that was almost exactly what I needed. This is a little bit short on spell suppress, so we're not quite capped, but otherwise it's perfect. Smooth speed, life, chaos res, open suffix. You're gonna have to fracture these yourself because they don't show up fractured, so these can get pretty expensive. Now let's talk about the item that we've all been waiting for, the 6,000 Evasion Syndicate's Garb. I got incredibly lucky crafting this. So I bought a 20 quality, 22 suppress base. I think this was like 20 divines at the time, with the idea that I would use dense fossils until I hit 3 prefixes for evasion, and then I would reforge chaos on the suffixes. That is what happened, but then I hit triple tier 1, and after some divines and a very lucky sacred orb, we have reached 6,000 evasion. This is all getting converted to armor with iron reflexes, but very, very cool chest. Okay, let's talk about the gems. We apply our Hex Touch temp chains with whirling blades. It is a bit clunky. You have to whirl through enemies. But once you get used to it and it becomes normal in your gameplay, you're dashing around all the time and your whirling blade speed is so fast, it feels like Frostblink. When you're at max Soul Eater stacks, whirling blades no longer plays an animation. It's crazy, crazy fast. So it applies this temp chains. As you can see here, our temp chains duration is 0.05 seconds. Depending on the ring you get, you're going to have to adjust your quality in your temp chains, take into account the 30 quality from the Ashes, and do the math yourself. In the helmet, we have Determination, Grace, and Precision, all connected to a level 4 Enlighten. We are using Sniper's Mark and Mark on Hit. There's some weird interaction with Assassin's Mark where it can trigger at the same time as a mark gets put on from Mark on Hit, and then you end up with Assassin's Mark overriding Sniper's Mark sometimes. But once you have Sniper's Mark on an enemy, Assassin's Mark will never override it. Assassin's Mark still does give us damage, but Sniper's Mark is much better, so I recommend including a Sniper's Mark and Mark on Hit here. We have a cast when damage taken Molten Shell alongside of Void Sphere and Tornado. Tornado just gives us a little bit more damage, really not important. And then Void Sphere is really nice for when you get mobbed by a lot of enemies. You'll take enough damage that the Void Sphere will get cast on the enemies, and it'll pull everything close together, pulling them often away from you. In our chest, we're using Cobra Lash, Volatility. This is super important because we are doing a lightning damage build where the base lightning damage is significantly lower, so increasing the maximum is really important. We have increased critical damage, Inspiration, Awakened Ally damage with attacks, and Nightblade. In the boots, I'm running Frostblink, Sigil of Power, Blood Rage, all connected to a level 4 Enhance. The Enhance is for mostly Sigil of Power and Blood Rage. Blood Rage is getting an additional 19% attack speed from its quality between the Enhance and the Ashes. Blood Rage's degen doesn't even matter because we have enough regen to make up for it. Frostblink gets a ton of travel distance. You can level this up as high as you can afford with your intelligence. Mine's just sitting at a level 2. Sigil of Power, I bought a 23 quality, so we are getting 15% less damage at maximum stages just from the quality. So even though this is a level 1 gem, after 4 seconds of straight attacking, we get 25% less damage taken from enemies in the area. Very, very strong on bosses. You are going to want to calibrate this to how much mana that you are spending. If you spend a lot more mana, you level this up even higher. So for the Ascendancy, we go for the Deadeye for the +1 chain and wall chain here. Wall chain is incredible, particularly in tier 17s. You can shoot down the hallway, things will bounce off the wall, go around the corner, and start hitting enemies before they even get on your screen. We get 2 additional projectiles from Endless Munitions, Gathering Winds for speed and damage, and then Avidity for more accuracy per frenzy charge, as well as an additional frenzy. You cannot rely on this frenzy charge while moving. It's horrible. You have to run for a full second before it generates a frenzy charge, which in practice very rarely happens. So unfortunately, you also have to take the Mark Mastery for frenzy charge on hit if you don't have any other single target solution. In order to get to 5 projectiles, we use a Fan of Blades and Fuel the Fight large, and we also use a Fan of Blades Megalomaniac. These are surprisingly common. Getting one with follow through is a bit more expensive, but follow through is where we get all of our increased damage. Lastly, I was able to grab Overshock, which helps with my lightning ailments, and I'm able to get sometimes as much as 40% shocks on Uber bosses. We have 2 more medium clusters with follow through and repeater. Obviously, I'm missing a point here. The other large, we take Wind Up. This is how we generate power charges. Over here, we have a pretty standard Lethal Pride, just going for double damage, life, regen, reduce damage from crits, things like that. But it's really to help solve our strength as well. This rune graft here really helps with our mana, provided our projectiles are ending. Things like the X-Arc doesn't have walls, so the projectiles don't end, they just disappear. I'm not sure if that's a bug or intended, but any arena that has walls or anything that you can hit, you will recover a ton of mana for all of those chains that you have left over. We use a Storm Shroud alongside of a Flash Suffix to get fully ailment immune. And lastly, for the jewels, we have an Impossible Escape here, which gives us 3 max res, a bunch of armor from these 2 nodes, as well as Eagle Eye, which is a huge amount of damage. So there's an option here on this evasion mastery. I'm not sure which one is better. You can get 15 suppress if all equipment has evasion rating on it, which we do have. And I did run that for a while. But once I got that 6,000 evasion chest, I switched it over to 100% increased evasion. This ends up giving us like 13,000 armor. And then I just used the lucky suppress mastery over here. So instead of being capped, we're at like 97% with lucky. You can decide what's better for you. Something vital is the masteries that we take in order to get more accuracy. These are massive multipliers to our damage, often matching the percentage that you see on the mastery. So up here we have the 40% more accuracy rating against unique enemies mastery. This ends up being a ton of damage. We also have this mark mastery here, which is 50% more accuracy against the marked enemy. And then lastly, more accuracy at close range. Because we are a point blank build, we are already at close range. So getting up close to monsters, your playstyle is effectively going to be dashing through a monster, dashing back, generating all those Soul Eater charges, and then standing real close to them and Cobra Lashing. And last but not least, the Mercenary. We're going to start with the Doryani's Prototype Saints Hauberk. I grabbed one with +1 max res just to make the guy a little tankier, but not super important there. I didn't even quality it. Oops. To go along with that, you want a couple of massive negative lightning res rings here. As you can see, we're at -198. I think that's close enough. This ring has a bunch of negative accuracy on it, which I actually think is pretty bad. I think it means that my kinetic blast is hitting way less. So if you're doing something like intimidate on hit, blind on hit, etc., the uptime is going to be worse if you take something like negative accuracy. But this is what I have. In the glove slot, we go for Soul Ascension. This allows them to hit a lot faster. But I'm also under the impression that they get the damage reduction from Soul Ascension. Soul Eater on mobs actually gives them up to 90% damage reduction, but doesn't work on players. But I was told that this works on your Merc and that they get damage reduction. So I have no proof of that, but I threw these on. I'm using a synthesized imbued wand for Intimidate. Before I switched over to pure armor, I was using the blind that I crafted on here. For the helmet, it's mostly for the recoup, but also the unaffected by poison. Damage over time can be more dangerous, it seems, to mercs than other things, so this helmet's just a nice addition. We use replica Victorios in order to get endurance charges. The uptime is okay. I think it would be better if I didn't have the minus accuracy, but it also gives us some curse effect for the haste. I use Ralikesh for endurance charges for the boots, so they always have endurance charges. An Immortal Flesh with -30 res is really helping me get to that negative res total for the Doryani's Prototype. And lastly, Perkle's Toe, which I should have an Anoint on. I should probably just have like Influence on here. But nearby allies damage is lucky is huge damage. I found this build to be a ton of fun. It was quite expensive to put together in some places. So please know before you try to build it that it's going to cost you a lot of divines. That said, Cobra Lash is one of my favorite skills, and I just wanted to see what I could do with the new meta tech. So stop by the Twitch, twitch.tv/AER0__. So thank you for watching. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff. Hit that notification bell, and I will see you in the next one. Oh, and as always, take care.